Everybody, welcome everybody who came for the afternoon program. So I see the visitors, but I don't think so. We will need to introduce Dr. Franklin again. You hear it in the morning. Uh, Fidelma, would you be able to introduce them to your friend? You're fine. That's okay. So I don't need to repeat that. That's fine. That's great. Thanks. So basically, I don't have too much to say. I would like to invite Dr. Franklin Cobos again to come and deliver the health message for us.
All right. I wonder if you'll pull up the slideshow for me on the screen. It's going on autopilot was the title. All right. So what we're going to talk about this afternoon has to do with behavior modification. That's what prescription in lifestyle medicine is all about. It is a set of instructions, recommendations, and behaviors that are shown to be therapeutic. We would seek in my specialty to replace or deprescribe prescription medications and replace those then with non-pharmaceutical means by which to achieve the same or superior effects without the cost or the side effects or the combined effects. We call that polypharmacy, when drug-drug interaction can take place and you kind of have to worry about some of those risks. Yeah, so going on autopilot, how to effortlessly destroy your life. How would you like to destroy your life? No, you don't want to do that, yet that is what we do. We tend to do things that we find to be easy. If it's effortless, we tend to do it more. What? Yeah, I turned it on and there it is. Yeah. So let's go through some of these important mechanisms that tend to drive human behavior. I think there was someone this morning who mentioned a Bible verse, the invitation from God, "Come, let us reason together." Habits are generally not based on reason. That these are some of the things I've listed here that influence most powerfully our behaviors. And we're going to go through a number of these. I think you all probably understand how it is that your habits control or impact how you behave. There's these things that we call biases. A bias within your mind is something that favors a certain direction. When you say somebody is biased, you might say, "I'm biased towards Ireland. I like Ireland. I have a bias," right? So if I go home and people ask me, "Well, did you like Ireland?" I say, "Well, yes, but I'm biased. I've been there several times and I really like it." So there's these biases, and one of the biases that impacts our behavior that I'll talk a bit about is the bias that we prefer to get things we want sooner rather than later. That's called an immediate reward bias, as opposed to a delayed reward. A delayed reward is getting a degree after 4 years of college. That's a delayed, and then you get a job with a salary. That's delayed gratification. But you have to have something to fight the immediate reward bias to get to that point in life. There's also environmental factors that will reinforce your behavior. There are things that you carry around in your mind that relate to who you believe you are as an individual. We call that our identity. And that you can have ideas that clash with that and have an identity mismatch that impacts how you behave. Then there are things that you do in life that help you cope or manage the distasteful elements in life. So we have these coping mechanisms that will influence our behavior. And then there are what we call cognitive dissonance defenses. These are defensive beliefs. Often they can be untrue, but we choose to believe them because they resolve discrepancies and contradictions that come up in our life. And we will find that it is easier to change our beliefs than to change our behavior. Behavior is much more difficult to change than it is to change our beliefs about ourselves. And it's particularly easy to believe a lie in comparison to changing our behavior. It's much, much easier to believe a lie than to change one's behavior. So this is kind of the summary of where we're going to go this afternoon in the next about 40 minutes. I mentioned this morning that we are creatures of free will. This is one of the instances in the scriptures where the free will was exercised. This was with the children of Israel. They were offered an opportunity to serve a different God if that's what they wanted to do. If it seemed evil to serve the Lord, they were offered the chance and opportunity to serve on that particular day a different God if that's what they wanted to do. I also added this verse, Romans 7:19, because it so well states the common human conflict that we feel when we know we are free to choose to do the right thing. We even are drawn or inclined and inspired to do good things, make right decisions, but we don't. So Paul described it this way in his experience: for the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I do. So he knows what's right and good, but he often won't do it. And the things that he knows are wrong, and he would prefer not to do that, he goes ahead and does that. So he describes this experience, this problem, in the scriptures, and we're going to dive a little bit into the science behind why does we behave this way. Depending on which studies you look at, you will find researchers estimate that between 40 and 60% of what we do from day to day, we don't actually make decisions. You just do it out of habit. And they are habitual, or you could say automatic behaviors that you will not pause even for 2 or 3 seconds to consider, to reason out, and then make a decision. I'm not sure which statistic I believe in, but it's a bunch. It's more than you might wish you did from day to day. And these habitual behaviors or habits are actually stored as programs, you might say. Programs in your brain, at the base of your brain, in an area called the basal ganglia. It's near the brainstem. And it is a programmed response loop that's encoded and programmed there by you when you make decisions that at first are new, that you've never done, and then over time as they're repeated, they become more ingrained or programmed as a response to various cues or triggers in your life, around you, maybe the environment, maybe other people, maybe other things. But that's where those habits are programmed. And they occur quickly on a short time course. It doesn't take time for your habits to take over your actions. And it turns out then that when we sometimes in medicine think of a patient who is living an unhealthy lifestyle, there are times where we have said that so-and-so of mine or my patients are just making poor choices. And that is true in the sense that at some point in the past they have chosen poorly. But once habits form, and certainly once addictions lock you in, and we'll talk about addictions tomorrow, there are no more choices being made. The choices have been made, and now you're on a pre-programmed set of responses. You actually aren't even choosing anymore. It's the unconscious part of your brain running on a pre-compiled program that's just executed in a very short time frame because your animalistic brainstem doesn't need time to think. It doesn't use judgment. It doesn't need to reason or use rationale. It's simply responding, and it's been programmed to do so, and to do so with little time spent and little cognitive power wasted on something it already has done again and again and again and again. And that's part of why you get good at something. I don't have to think about riding a bicycle like I used to when I was little. I had to think about it so hard that I needed trainers. It took so much bandwidth and energy to focus and concentrate and not fall off and crack my head on the sidewalk. But then you do it again and again and again and again and again. A program is formed. I don't have to think about it anymore, and it's just happening. So that's an example of a habit or a habitual program that's run. I don't have to choose to ride a bicycle. There are certain women I see, I don't have to choose that they're attractive. It's just a response, okay? I don't think about it. It just happens. I don't have to choose my favorite color. It's just, oh, green, I like green. I didn't have to think that over. Those are just kind of brainstem level responses. And so if you make choices that are poor long enough, you don't choose it anymore. You chose it already, and now the program is performing the way you programmed yourself by your previous choices. So you see kind of how tricky. You may have had or heard discussions where such and such is not a choice. I was born this way. It feels that way, but all of our actions tend to have some choice programs early on that we tend to forget about. All right, so let's talk a bit more about some of these details. So actually, I kind of went through this. So the habitual things we do are unconscious responses. They've been pre-programmed already through our choices. They don't take much time. They don't take a lot of energy. None of that is constraining you from acting a certain way that's habitual. And so the probability of you doing these things is very high. On the other hand, new choices, new actions require conscientious thought generally. The prefrontal cortex will engage and start thinking, is this good? Is it bad? Is it safe? Is it unsafe? Does it align with my preferences in the past? Does it, all these things go on that kind of slow down the mind from committing to a certain course of action. That takes a lot more energy, and so the probability of acting on those thoughts then goes down, especially when compared to the high probability of the habitual actions, which are generally predictable and easy to say they're going to happen. All right, so it took too many clicks. Let me go back. I'll wait. I'm sure it will come up in several seconds. There it is. So, actions that are based on your habits, those can be executed before your forebrain, prefrontal cortex, those frontal lobes, before they even have time or energy to cast a vote for or against a given action. The quick basal ganglia has already decided, well, we're going to do this. French vanilla ice cream, oh, we eat. Yeah. There's no need to wait for a decision there. You just eat that stuff. That's good, right? So this is how we believe you can know what's right in the higher centers of your brain, but then not do what's right, because the brainstem, the lower powers, are quick and easily executed before you have time to kind of rationally think about stuff. So this is also why motivation alone is generally not good enough to overcome these inculcated, ingrained behavioral patterns or habits that you've had growing in the past through your own choices and decisions. Some have argued that one way then to change people is to simply change their environment. Right? So you change the triggers, you change the cues that are causing them to respond in certain ways at the level of their brainstem. They believe you can change the person by changing the environment. And so that's kind of one of the theories of behavioral change. I would say, yes, you could change a person's behavior by changing their environment, and no, you probably can't change the person by changing their environment, depending upon the mind of the person. It depends on what those programs are and what environment you're gonna put them in. A quick Bible example comes to my mind. Joseph, as he's raised in his father's household to serve the Lord, is transplanted into a new environment in Egypt. Totally different environment, and one of the triggers and cues he gets is from Potiphar's wife, who wants to have an illicit relationship with him. That was insufficient. That environment was insufficient for him to behave in a way that Potiphar's wife thought he would behave. The way the environment had worked for other men in her past experience did not work on Joseph. Daniel and his three friends, another good example, where the environment that was set up at, say, the Tower of Babel was very effective in changing some people's behavior, but it was insufficient. The environment alone was insufficient. Even when they threw them in the fiery furnace, that environment was insufficient to change the way they behaved. So depending on the mind of the person, you may or may not be able to change that person's behavior. All right, I think I mentioned that already. We don't have to go too deep into the labels of the brain. Yep, clicker's not working. Thank you. That's good. So what I did is I created this equation that your habitual behaviors, this is kind of like in college or school, they make all these math equations. Your habitual behaviors, that's B sub H. Some people feel it's a function of, that's f of x, a function of the context or the cues, the triggers in your environment, with the friction or lack thereof, a friction that would prevent or encourage you to do something. And then, like I said, the triggers are the cues. So you put all that together, there is the idea that that can impact then your behaviors. And if they are habits, that equation will hold true. But like Daniel and his three friends, or Joseph, who didn't have the habit of doing those types of things they were tempted to do, that didn't work because it wasn't a habitual behavior that they had cultivated in the past behaviors that they engaged in their growing up years. I'm still not working with the clicker. There it is. So your behaviors that are habitual can't generally be impacted through just motivation. You can go to these kind of motivational conferences or meetings, even if this provides you some degree of motivation to change, that is not going to be sufficient. I can give you information and change your intellect, your knowledge, and your understanding, and you might think, well, I should make more thoughtful choices about the foods that I eat or the amount of physical exercise I'm taking or the time I go to bed at night. It just makes more sense to me. But thoughtful choices, information, knowledge, and motivation do not typically impact in a significant way the habitual behaviors that you perpetrate. So now let me give you some more examples of how this might look in real life. Go ahead and advance for me, please. Again. So I redid my slides, but since we already saved them on the computer back there, I didn't give you a new copy of the slides, but hopefully these will work well enough. So here's an example that happens a lot at the hospitals where I work. You have some habitual behavior, which is a function of going to a stressful job. At the hospital, you're dealing with sick people, people who are dying, people whose family members might sue you if they think you did a bad job. And particularly on night shift, where the cafeteria is closed and you didn't bring any food with you to eat overnight, and then there's this bowl of candy at the nurse's station, those function well with habitual behavior to equal, I will now eat what I know I should not. Right? So you're tired, you're up all night, it's a lot of stress, you didn't bring lunch, and there's bowls of candy at the nurse's station, and you went there to give orders for a sick patient. You don't stop to think. You stop to pause to eat, but you don't stop to pause to think that I should not eat what is in front of me. Does that example kind of start helping you see how these kind of parts of habitual behavior come together to defeat you through the environment, through triggers or cues? Let me kind of expand on that word friction if you're not clear what I'm trying to say. Friction is, it's easy to eat out of a candy bowl that's in front of you. It would be harder if it was in a vending machine behind a locked glass door and you don't have change in your pocket. That's a high friction barrier situation. Whereas generally at work we find bowls of free candy that's not locked. It's just out there for people to, what we say, graze upon, like we're cattle just mooing through the night, down through the halls of the hospital. And just laboring through the night shift like a dumb animal, and we just munch, munch, munch. Calories, fat, salt. It's all good, right? We're just the brain, just totally brain dead. Okay, I have another example, I guess. We'll advance through this. Yeah, it's still not working. Click. Yeah, so this was again to underscore the idea that your habitual behaviors will not typically change at all, even if you have motivation and make thoughtful choices. Advance, please. Yeah, so motivation to change, even though that's good. Knowledge of health, doing health education, public speaking like this that I do, these things are insufficient for me to change your behavior when we're talking about habits and habit formation. Next slide. Yeah, so none of that is sufficient to stop you from eating what you know is bad. Next slide. We'll give you time. If you could just stop using that software like we did last night and swap over, it'll work much better. I think that's the one where we were on that one. Okay. Are we working now? Yes, it seems to be working. Thank you. So let me talk to you now about this problem of cognitive dissonance. That's just a fancy term that we use to describe the inconsistencies or discrepancies which can coexist in your mind and cause conflict between what you believe is right and what you do. And what generally will happen with the fallen human is it will find some unhealthy way of resolving that conflict between the ears. One of the two most common ways is to downplay the risk, and I chose to switch back to this example from working at the hospital where you're roaming the halls there like a farm animal, and you're not thinking, and you pause, and there is this kind of faint thought in the back of your head that said, I should probably just pass the candy bowl by, right? And because, I'm a health professional. I talk about health. I promote health. How can I what did Joseph say? How can I do this great evil and sin against the Lord? Right? So, but we downplay the risk by saying it's only one, right? It's only one candy. There's not that many calories in it. It's not that bad, right? Because the trouble, of course, is it isn't one candy, right? It's like the whole tube, and it is more than just 1 calorie, and that's when it becomes bad. The other common unhealthy resolution of this internal conflict we have is, once again, we lie to ourselves and say, I deserve this. It should be I've, not I be, but I've managed a very stressful day. And so I justify doing this right now because of all these other things. The truth is you don't deserve it right now, and clearly you're not managing that stressful day that well. And it's kind of, if you remember, you may have had this advertisement here in Ireland when McDonald's came. When I was a kid, there was a jingle that McDonald's would play that began with the phrase, "You deserve a break today. So get up, get on it, and get on your way to McDonald's." They would sing you into the belief that you deserved to be at McDonald's. Okay? So that played right off the self-justification. Everybody in America knows and has known that you can't eat that much salt and fat and not supersize yourself. That's what happens. But you do deserve to be supersized, don't you? And they deserve to be paid scads of money while you do it. So that's cognitive bias, cognitive dissonance, and that's two really common but unhealthy ways in which we will resolve that conflict in our brains. So, immediacy bias, what is that? It has to do much more with reward than it does reason. We don't take time to reason things through. The average person is heavily present biased. From birth, you generally can take young people before they even get into school and tell them, I'll give you one piece of chocolate to eat right now, or if you wait 30 minutes, we'll give you 2 pieces of chocolate later. There's probably about 80 to 90% of those kids will eat the chocolate right then and there. And they'll turn their back on 2 pieces because it's not happening right now. They cannot stand to wait 30 minutes to have twice as much of what they want, what they say they want, but they won't wait for it. So this is what we call present bias or immediacy bias. So these immediate rewards, be they sugar or physical comfort or pleasure or rest, generally will override the rational, knowledge-based long-term benefits that relate to health or longevity because of this condition of fallen humanity. So knowledge and data alone, just the raw information that I might give you, and the understanding generated by it, they might be present and accounted for in your forebrain, in the prefrontal cortex, or PFC is what I labeled it on the slide. But the brainstem down there in the basal ganglia are still going to drive decisions based on what? Emotional reward, rather than rational, intelligent understanding. So let's talk about coping mechanisms and how they engage with our human behavior. A lot of the habits that we develop over time, we do so as a means of managing some of the negativity that we are exposed to from day to day in our daily, activities of daily living. Turns out the subconscious part of our mind is very resistant to losing these coping mechanisms because they have been proven over time to be very effective in making us feel better. not be better, but feel better. And so the brain generally will not tolerate the loss of these coping mechanisms. Smoking and alcohol, often used as self-medication um, for mental suffering, scrolling, surfing the internet, eating. There's a spectrum of socially acceptable coping mechanisms. I didn't put on here things like cocaine, heroin, some of the harder drugs, but those are also used as coping mechanisms. Just turns out law enforcement tends to really frown on those, but law enforcement will not come and arrest you if you have too much cake and ice cream. The truth is, the mechanisms in your head are all the same. They're all exactly the same pathways, and it's a matter of intensity and social acceptability. So smoking, alcohol, surfing the internet, scrolling, doom scrolling, as you might say, app clicking, eating, all these can be used, not necessarily, but they can be used as means by which we find we can regulate or manage the perceptions of our negative emotions or high stress and combat the impact that they make on us from day to day, whether that impact is at work or at home in your family, at school, all of these things. And it turns out what we discover is if you rapidly remove or change these habits, they're bad habits, right? You would think we need to eliminate them and change them, get rid of them. But by removing or changing these particular habits that have been adopted as a coping mechanism, lead to a functional deficit within that person's life. It's not just a gap in their behavior that can be quickly and easily filled with something harmless that's quicker, easier, or more healthy. The brain resists these changes. The brain will fight you tooth and nail, and that's why people will relapse into the kind of the harder addictions, but we also relapse into the more socially accepted coping mechanisms like eating or scrolling as well. But again, it's for the same reasons. It's the same circuitry in the brain. We are really no different. That reminds me that I think in med school they taught us, one of the leading psychiatrists through medical history said once that one of the most difficult things he had ever tried to do was to convince someone that they're just like everybody else. We all want to believe that we're unique and I'm not like you and I'm so different and you have to understand differences. And yes, there are differences. But the truth is so the joke was this, we would say, you are unique, just like everybody else. You, my brother, you, my sister. Yes, God made you so unique and He did it just like everybody else. So we like to think we're unique and different, but many of the things that go on inside our head that we all hate about ourselves, everybody else is suffering from the same thing. It's just a different setting or magnitude that their deficit represents. So all of those things are to say that when we struggle as people to change our behavior, it's not because we lack understanding or concern. Right? Most people have a basic grasp and understanding of healthy living. Most people have a self-awareness and concern that I don't want to kill myself with bad decisions. But none or all of that combined is able to overcome the automatic habitual circuitry that is firing in all of our heads every single day, that is biased towards immediate satisfaction and reward, that's also reinforced with all the shall we say, the wickedness around us in society. This is why country living is preferable to metropolitan city living. Did we talk about identity mismatch? We might need to do that. We talked about the resistance to losing coping mechanisms. And I think we have time. We'll talk a little bit about identity mismatch. And we did cover cognitive dissonance defenses. That would be self-justification. And what was the other one? We justify it, and then we reason. We reason away. Right? I deserve this. All right, so let's go through what I call as an algorithm for helping you change your bad behavior. And let me just say this too, because I think I might have forgotten it on one of my presentations till somebody pointed it out at the end. And that is, remember the Bible verse that says, without me, ye can do how much? Nothing. Right? So some of these hacks that I'm going to give you, life hacks, will help for some of you, and for some of you, they'll be completely useless. That's because, remember, you're unique, just like everybody else. So there are some people who do not struggle in one area of life, but they have a horrible troubles in another where you might have no trouble at all. But the truth is, both of you have circuitry running that you're struggling with that is manifesting in different ways. So you have this illusion that you're unique, but the underlying truth is you're exactly the same. Okay? So let's start here. I think I picked a generic struggle of something you're doing. You know it is wrong. So each of you in your own mind pick something that you know you shouldn't do. You know it's wrong, and you begin with this one question. So each person keep that habit in your mind, or behavior that you wish you could change, but you struggle and have found it difficult. We're gonna run through this algorithm, and we're gonna determine what part of your brain and what part of this loop and process is predominantly responsible for your inability to change. And then we can start addressing that with a couple strategies, acknowledging that Jesus alone is the power behind your plan for successful lifestyle change. Okay? Despite the fact that there may be a few areas where you don't struggle that much. And you might think, oh, Lord, I got this under control. You might today, but trust me, the devil's trying to make sure you don't later on. So, Jesus is the key for lifestyle change. And with that, I want to help you understand what's going on in your fallen mind to help you work through this more successfully with him. So, think this behavior and ask yourself the question, is this something you do without even thinking? Because at some point you just, I didn't even think, and I did it again, right? So, if that's what's taking place, if the answer to that question, do you do this without even thinking, is a yes, you need solutions that focus on that automaticity of the habit. So solutions for habits involve that equation that I was showing you. Avoiding the cues or triggers, dealing with friction or creating some barriers, and altering the environment or the context in which you find yourself struggling because you didn't even think about it. And if I remember, once we run through this algorithm, I think I gave an example that we'll break it down a little bit more clearly. But, so those of you who said yes, we're going to talk more about avoiding the cues, dealing with friction, and environmental context. So, if you answered no, though, that means there's some other area in your psychology and in your mind that needs to be addressed. And here's another option, might be, ask yourself the question then, when I do this thing that I know is wrong, does it feel good or relieve my stress right away? Yes. Okay, so we've got some yeses. And it may be that you find a couple yeses, and that's okay. Does it feel good and relieve my stress immediately? If the answer to that is yes, your behavior is largely the result of immediacy bias or an altered coping solution that you're trying to use. And so really what you need to be thinking about instead is to address the root cause of the stress. You might consider then replacing the reward or adding some immediate benefit to some new behaviors. The way we will do this in lifestyle medicine, let me give you an example of people who would travel to my lifestyle center called the Doctor's Inn from their home. They might take a week off from their job, and come to be with me. And then we re-engineer their daily schedule, and they live a different life while they're at the doctor's inn than they lived when they're back home. What that does then, I have eliminated what the root causes of their stress generally are geographically bound. And when they leave their home state of Texas, California, Connecticut, New York, and come to Tennessee, the root cause is temporarily interrupted. It also helps people sometimes identify them because now suddenly it's gone. We also replace the rewards they were giving themselves, like the cake and ice cream. We replace those with other rewards that have to be equipotent. It's hard to replace the joy of vanilla ice cream with just a small bowl of salad with no salad dressing. All right? So we'll get to that a bit tomorrow about how you need to kind of do an equipotent dose of happiness in that bowl if you're going to get rid of the vanilla ice cream or chocolate or whatever is your favorite. So you do replace the reward, but it has to be intelligently done. And then if you can add immediate or short-term benefits to these new behaviors, it makes it such that psychological momentum is built. So when people come away and we draw their blood and we check their triglycerides, their lipids, their body weight, their blood pressure, relatively soon, within 5 to 10 days, those things begin to improve, and they see on these reports we can generate a more immediate, I mean, it's not immediate, it's not the same day, okay? But it's near-term benefits associated strongly with the new behavior, which is the diet change in their sleep, change in their physical activity, their stress management, their connectivity with other people, their avoidance of the risky foods and things they were doing. All these things combine, and suddenly they see some more immediate behaviors, and that helps then fight the underlying causes that were pushing them towards coping mechanisms and these immediacy reward pathways that had locked them into bad lifestyle habits before they arrived with me for lifestyle medicine. All right, so that's a brief run through of what to do if that's you, that's me. Yes, it feels good and relieves my stress right away. But if it's not you, maybe it's something else. Maybe you could ask yourself the question, if this weren't around, would you still do this? This gets to the question of identity that I had mentioned in passing a couple slides ago. And so again, there's the possibility that if you change the environment, and the environmental solutions can remove triggers and add friction to bad behavior to make it harder and facilitate good behavior, this might be a way out for you. I wanted to talk about the identity one. Maybe the identity question is next. Yeah, this is it. This is what interests me. I have a personal example I'll share with you. And this question would probably be best framed from the opposite direction. Like when I started being more serious about my exercise routine and doing some resistance training, I knew it was good for me, but I preferred aerobic exercise, not the free weights at a gym. And so I would have to ask myself, when I go to the gym, does this feel like something you don't do? Yes, it felt like this is not where I belong. The women are stronger than me and bigger than me. The guys, like they can fit me in one of their pant legs. They're like Quadzilla, and they're squatting 600 pounds. It did not feel like it was something I did. And so there needed to be some identity solutions that I applied. So I ended up needing to kind of reframe and redefine who I was, from I'm not a guy who goes to the gym to I'm a guy who wants to be stronger. Yeah. So while it's true in one side of my head the reality of myself is I don't belong here. Fine, I'm not going to fight that, but I can form a new identity over here on this side of my split personality and say, but I am somebody who wants to grow some muscle mass. Okay? And you can use new language when you talk to yourself. And celebrate small symbolic wins because they will add up. Like one small symbolic win was I actually finished a workout routine without hurting myself. The first, say, month I'm going to the gym, despite the fact that my weight doesn't change. I'm still just as skinny and scrawny and feel just as weak and tired, and my muscles are killing me after, the couple weeks there at the gym. But by celebrating those small wins and not letting my old identity dominate my decision to reform a new and better improved identity, I got to celebrate some bigger wins later, but it took months and years, actually years later, to celebrate some of those wins. So yeah, it might not feel like something you do, but there are ways out of that. All right, if any man be in Christ, he is a what creature? New, unique, just like everybody else, right? You can be born again just like any of the other disciples who were, people who called down fire from heaven on their enemies and struggled to see who could be the greatest and, betrayed each other and stuff like that. So next question. I think this is our last one. On your worst day, could you realistically do this? And I would have to ask myself this too. And I'm, horrible night on call. I didn't get good food. My worst day, could I still go to the gym to do what I knew was right? Actually, that should be a no. On your worst day, could you realistically do this? No, really, I can't. I can't do this. If the answer is no, we need to simplify things. Simplification strategies to make it possible or more easy that even though it's your worst day, you can still do this. So some strategies doing that would be make the good choice the extremely easy choice. Also, eliminate the need to make the decision. And another idea would be to create a standard routine that makes the good choice more easy. And again, I think we will revisit some of these solutions when we talk tomorrow about food addiction and media addictions. So that'll be tomorrow. Now we have time for some questions and answers. So anything that was up there you want me to expand upon, go ahead, brother.
I asked, as we were speaking about those triggers.
Triggers.
The trigger is like my arrival home in the night, which will trigger eating habits.
Yes.
What to do with that trigger?
Well, that one is an unavoidable one, right? Because you're going to go home at the end of the day. And if you're saying arriving at home at night, so would you, or evening, just at the end of your day. Okay. So that's maybe not so much a trigger as it is an environment. So the trigger occurs probably when you walk in the house and you go to the kitchen. Okay, that's a trigger. So that you're not going to, I don't think your wife and family want you to change environments and quit coming home after every day at work, right? So you'd like to keep them around, I assume. So let's not change that part of the environment. The part of the environment you might change is the relationship with the kitchen. So I might ask, are you the one who cooks?
It's not about the cooking. It's pretty much about those kind of shelves which you can open and get something.
Okay, so funny you should mention the shelf that you can open, because that means you're not cooking, and it's probably not good food. It's probably in a package with a bunch of ingredients listed with added sugars, salt, and calories. So that kind of cooking, yeah, the cooking that you just open the bag and it's cooked, yeah. So you alter the environment then and reduce the availability to nothing, or you increase the friction. So the friction would be things like the number of those packages go down so that you run out quicker, or they're not there, or they're not visible, or they're hard to reach. You usually use those type of things for the kids. You know, the kids usually, they'll sneak into the kitchen, they're going to snack, it's after school, but it's before mom's made supper. And so typically we'll tell the parents to not have those foods down low in the cabinets and the shelves where the kids can reach them. Get them out of reach, and then out, not only physically out of reach, but visually out of reach, so that when you open the cabinet, they don't say, "Oh, mom hid the cookies up on the top shelf. Now we know where they are," and they start building things in the garage to like climb up there. So you got the physical barrier, visible barrier. Ideally, it's the geographic barrier. They're just not in the house anymore. Is kind of the best solution for that scenario that allows you to still come home every day after work, and you reduce the fear of that type of diet down to nothing. But it may be that you have to work your way there. You might have to like decrease the supply, try to decrease the demand, and then eliminate the supply. So you need a follow up? Was that at all helpful, or did I skirt the issue? Or
If I can add still something, because I have already tested that, just to eliminate everything, which could be coming with me, or yes, the temptation, yes. But there is like the very substitutive mind or substitutive asset coming, to myself. So if I'm changing from the sweet, let's say, to the cheese, and down to the cheese to the special cooking device, or whatever, cooking ingredients, and so probably changing homes.
So I remember I mentioned that there could be multiple yeses for you as we go through this algorithm. It may be that you master one area of a yes, and then you discover there's actually another, because all the solutions for the one were insufficient to correct the behavior. It might be then now identity or coping that is layered on top of you, that once you address one of those keys, now it's time to work on the others, which is frustrating because we would wish that you have just one key to one problem and you're solved and you're on with your life and you can do something else. But these will sometimes pile up on each other, and you have to peel back layers like an onion, and it just keeps stinging your eyes and making you cry as you progress this layer of onion, and you discover you are so unique, just like everybody else who is addicted maybe to certain behaviors. Okay, next question. There's one up front. We'll get to you, ma'am, and so after this gentleman.
Yeah, just a quick question there, just around, you're talking about addictions and behaviors, but,
Yes.
But what are your thoughts around the trauma, like a person's trauma, either from childhood or ancestral trauma, any of these traumas in the body or on a cellular level,
Right.
and is creating that behavior and addiction?
Right, so you're mentioning what in the States are called ACEs, adverse childhood events. They can be genetically encoded. The Bible speaks of these as the third and fourth generations of the sins of the fathers. Those can be transmitted, those tendencies and propensities transmitted genetically. And that sets the children up much more easily to succumb to bad habit formations. And if it's intergenerational, it's almost guaranteed, it's essentially a certainty that these will be practices that span generations. When adverse events occur in childhood, because the brain is not yet based on reason, it's all those brainstem automatic kind of programs, it's real easy to form these bad habits in children against their awareness. They don't even know what's going on. Some of them can really have a hard time remembering what took place that can help a mature counselor figure out what went wrong and how can we help them in the present. Because children haven't quite fully developed the way adults have. You can't really talk to them and reason with them the same. And the devil understands this. And so it's much more effective for the forces of darkness to impact children below the age of 5 to 7 because their success with the kids is almost virtually guaranteed. A longer term, more permanent outcome. I won't describe too much of what I've known and seen in those areas, but rest assured you're correct. And that these type of life hacks generally are more effective for adults and not as effective for people who have experienced adverse childhood events, because they've developed coping mechanisms that are very, very firmly wired in their behavior. However, all things are possible through Him that strengthens us, and there is always the possibility of true conversion experience for those who have been steeped in even demonic practices to be set free from them in this life. It's generally, though, the rule that those youth who are in the worst conditions have been groomed for that. I've met people who were groomed to do certain things for the adults in their life, their handlers. There's even elements of that show up in popular Hollywood entertainment that is basically describing and revealing what's going on in the dark world of human trafficking. And there's a part in Revelation, I don't know if you read it, there's trafficking that triggers the wrath of God in the last days. And my opinion is that a lot of it is actually not merchandise that's being like sold and buying. It's buying and selling of the souls of men, mostly children, because it's easy to manipulate them and make them do what you want long term if you can pre-program them at a young age. So, do you have follow-up? Is it okay or okay? I think a sister up here in the pink shirt had her hand up.
Sorry. Yeah, just briefly on that as well. Being Irish, we've also been hearing research that it could have come down from our famine, that we have this thing about food. And I don't know if you've any thoughts on that. It's
I do.
Intergenerational.
Sure. I'll give two examples, one being in Ireland because of the famine. Right, the Irish famine, the potato famine, emotionally scarred this nation very deeply in ways that were not understood back during those times. And food was used to manipulate people and coerce them into choosing a system of religion, be it Catholicism or Protestantism, or we'll feed you if you convert, kind of thing like that. So that is a deep part of forming behavior at a young age and intergenerationally. Another example that's a little more healthy came out of World War II. There were areas in Europe that went on, restricted food rationing for the war, and there was swaths of people that then retrospectively were studied who were forced into vegetarianism because it was too uncommon to find meat, and so you found some improvement and longevity that occurred unintentionally in these populations because they were forced onto a plant-based diet against their wishes just because of scarcity, and that it shows up and transmitted through epigenetics really is what was going on through grandkids and on until it dissipates generally after the third and fourth generation. So it can so in other words, I guess what I was trying to say is it happens both ways. You can have bad effects transmitted that way. You can even have good blessings transmitted in a similar manner. So I think now she's been very patient up here in the front.
Oh, mine is just something to say. This lesson just came the right time because recently I've been having these habits just recently, and I've been saying, I was telling my friend here to say, he's talking about me because
I'm talking about all of us, sister. I'm talking about because remember, we're all unique, just like everyone else.
I will say I know it's not very good, but I deserve it. I've been working hard. Like I have
You
a
deserve
hard
a
week,
break today.
so I deserve this. So I've been doing it lately. So thank God.
You deserve this. I see Brother Joe has his hand in the back.
I just want to expand on the question that this gentleman asked. Yes, I think you have explained the part of how do people fall into these type of habits, based on generational cases
Yes.
or childhood events that led them to to start behaving that way. But I think the piece that I need a better explanation, or that I think this gentleman needs a better explanation, is how do you come out of that? How do you break that generational case? How do you make a turning point? Because at the end of the day, it's good to understand why you are behaving the way you are behaving and how we are doing, why you are doing what you are doing. But I think the most helpful part is when we actually find a solution to that problem.
Right. Maybe I could give an example. I don't know if he would like me to do, but Brother Gabriel, who some of you heard his testimony coming out of demonic worship. He was raised as a child as a Christian killer, cannibalist. Yeah. Conversion is the only true way out of that depth of habit formation. And because of that, the process of conversion involves repentance, confession, and forgiveness. There's a lot of healing in that. That a secular system, just based on science, like I put on the screen, is generally going to fail those more extreme cases, because people have a bad identity. I am this. I am. That's why we see a lot of beaten women stay with the men who beat them, because of their bad self-identity. They can't identify as someone who shouldn't be there. They deserve to be here. And so it's an identity problem, and you get a new identity in Christ. It has to do with forgiving yourself for all the things you think you've done wrong, and we have done things that are wrong. And forgiveness comes from Christ, so you'll get it there. It has to do also with the power to make decisions you've never made before, a weakened will, and that is provided through conversion, which conventional psychiatry and prescription medications can't generate that kind of power. For some people, in some instances, it proves therapeutic to a degree, greater or lesser. But the more severe adverse childhood events, I think, are more the realm of a spiritual cure through a restored connection with the Creator, who can recreate in that person somebody who alone they'll never be on their own, and who they're, we might say, handlers or an abusive spouse or parent might not want them to be anyway, right? So they're trying to keep them down, you might say. So yes, some of these things are important to understand and know, but when you're trapped into that degree, only God alone and the power of Jesus is going to break them free from that kind of a situation. That's where Christians can do service for those around them by explaining the simple, brief steps of conversion and coming to Christ to surrender. And there would be, a loving Christian would be very important, so that when this person relapses, and they often will, they find that there's actually a human being who sympathizes with them and can encourage them and say, hey, I haven't given up on you. Why should you give up on you? God hasn't given up on you. Everybody else may say that they're giving up on you, but I'm here to say that God loves you and He has not given up on you. So that can be really helpful.
For that explanation, because a lot of people, they are looking for coping mechanisms, like you said.
That's right.
Coping mechanism is because they're trying to cope with a trauma or past experiences in the bad way, and then they got caught up even much more bad things in the end. So I guess where this should be very helpful to us is, how do you cope with those past bad experiences in a positive and much more healing way? And thanks so much for this, solution you gave us, where, seeking God, even if the problem looks like it's not finishing at that moment, but with the hope of reconciliation with Christ on His second coming, that alone is enough for you to to keep going, and being around people that have also failed and get victorious is also
It's
another way of
a therapeutic relationship.
Yes, therapeutic relationship.
Maybe I should say it like this. If Christians are so dishonest and non-transparent with newcomers to portray this false facade of perfection, you are not going to help them.
Yeah.
You really ought to just come out and say, you know what? I really struggle with some things too. They're not like what you've struggled with, and they might not have scarred me the way they've scarred you.
Yeah.
However, I have my failings as well,
Yeah.
and God has helped me in these ways. I cannot help you, but I can point you to the master physician, and he can help you just as well as he helped me get better. So it's important that I think as Christians we not misrepresent our own past, which has as many faults, though different, just like everybody else, with newcomers who have problems that you might find so troubling and serious that you maybe never even seen or had to dealt with them, but people out in the world have, and God is the solution. So I think maybe that verse I used this morning from Paul, where he said, "All those things in the past that used to be gain, I count them but loss." He was honest about what he did. He said, I used to be someone who persecuted Christians. He didn't come up with some type of secret folder like an Epstein file that, oh, me? No, I've never killed Christians before. I'm a model Christian. I'm the Apostle Paul. No, the truth is you were a mercenary and you hunted and killed people. And he says, now I don't. And I think there's another letter he writes about all types of deviant behaviors he mentions, and then says, and such were some of you. But now ye are washed. Ye are now new. So it's important that we admit the truth while not dwelling upon it, dwelling more upon the power of Christ to transform into new creatures. So, yeah. Something else? Or is that, this young lady has a hand up.
Right. My question is on how do you stop the good habits that you already have? So you find that with speaking from a Christian perspective, you might find yourself praying and worshiping God and doing your devotionals, and one day you just stop. And to pick it up from where you left, it becomes very hard. You go to the gym every single day, and one day you just stop. To pick up from where you left is hard. You talked about simplification, but
Yes.
some things such as kneeling down and talking to God, there seems to be no way to simplify that. It's either you are praying or you're not.
It's a yes/no, just about.
So how do you get to a position where the habits, or maybe it's not a habit yet, but how do you then continue to do the good things that you've been doing so that you don't stop doing them?
Yeah, so you bring up an interesting issue. Why is it that good habits feel as though they're not as strong as bad habits? That's what I heard. Did somebody else hear? Am I misstating what your question is? Why is it that the things that are good, and they seem to be habitual because I've done them for some time, right? Why does it seem so easy to break those habits, but very difficult to break the bad habits? Okay. That has to do, in my estimation, my professional opinion, with the fallen nature of man. So an evolutionist, a non-creation-based physician, would only come up with theories or ideas of why that might be. I believe our tendency is to do evil. That's what we naturally do that. And that's why it's naturally easier to engage in and suffer from bad habits. It's because you're already going uphill if you're wanting to do what's right, good, or best, health promoting, something that will give you longevity, solidify your relationship with the Creator. All that is already at a baseline going to be harder because it is unnatural for the naturally fallen human. Now, we didn't have that with Adam and Eve right after creation. It was only after the fall where the nature of man shifted to a fallen nature, right? And that's why Paul can say stuff like, the things that I know I should do, I don't. Things that I wish I shouldn't know I should do, I don't do that either. Or vice versa. This is where, again, the connection with Christ is going to be your solution. The other thing I would point out, and I chose not to use it for today's sermon, but I can give you the link if you want to see it, because I gave it a month ago in America. And that has to do with the relationship of suffering, the experience of suffering, and its relationship to the Christian life. I think most of us would realize that we are generally driven to seek comfort. That's part of how we are wired in this world. We do not seek things that are painful, tiresome, or cause suffering. Early on, at the beginning, after Adam and Eve fell, do you remember what God said about what was going to take place as he told Adam and Eve to leave the garden? He told Adam he was going to till the ground from which he was taken, and he said some other things about the ground. Do you remember what it was? He said, "Cursed be the ground." Why? What are the next three words? For thy sake. It is in our best interest as fallen humanity to work hard, to suffer, and to toil. Because if you do not, you will go down into everlasting darkness with the devil and his angels. And so when Christ came, what did he do? He suffered too. And so the invitation to follow Christ included deny yourself, take up your cross. How often? Daily. And Paul describes it like this: I blank daily. I die daily. Where did he get that idea? He got that idea from Jesus. And he understands that Jesus practiced that type of lifestyle and tolerated being uncomfortable every single day. Can you imagine going to church with people who want to kill you? Some of us don't have to imagine, actually. The church politics can be kind of rough. The world over. I mean, trust me. And not just in America or Ireland, it's everywhere. It is difficult. And if you cannot tolerate being uncomfortable for extended periods of time, it's going to be hard for you to live a Christian life. Because the devil is going to make you suffer. Because he wants you to pursue comfort. And forget about this following Jesus thing. He wants you on his side. So he's going to make your life as comfortable as possible through entertainment, through various foods, relationships, money, power, all this stuff. He wants you to be very comfortable with him. And that just makes your life more likely to follow his path and follow his ways. And it's the reverse with Christianity. The suffering of Christ is what Christianity is about for now. I heard somebody say it like this: people will seek strength, resilience, toughness, victories. They all admire and seek those things, but they seek to find them in comfortable environments. You will not find victory in comfortable environments. There is no military on the earth that takes their soldiers and puts them in bean bags and feeds them cream puffs to get ready for World War III. You will not find greatness by pursuing comfort. And it is great to be a child of the King. And so he calls us to some suffering, because on the other side of suffering is greatness. It was on the other side of the tomb, on the other side of the cross, on the other side of all those arguments with his disciples trying to decide who was going to be the greatest. After death to self, after humbling themselves and praying together with the very ones that they were arguing with, before the cross, they pray in the upper room for this period of time, and then the Holy Spirit is poured out, and great things happened in the book of Acts after suffering through the Gethsemane betrayal, the experience, the fleeing of all, the disciples, and one of them takes off naked. If you read the Gospels, one of them just like, ah! You talk about trauma. Strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. That's what happened. So I too am just like you. I regret that the hard habits, or the habits that are most easily formed, are the bad ones. And the ones which I wish I could form more easily, those are the hard ones to form. But it's part of the remolding process that God has for us that must take place, because we are free will creatures. If we weren't, He could just, God could just, boom, snap. There's no suffering. I just reprogrammed you like a little robot, and you're just changed in a twinkling of an eye, and there's nothing left for you to do. But then you have to ask the question, well, what happened to your identity? Is it really you? Or were you just erased and replaced with an upgraded copy of somebody who's kind of like you, but the real you died and is just gone now? And so I think God values our individuality and free will sufficiently that He will tell us the truth, which is, okay, you want to live? I want you to live too. I love you. But for you to get from where you are to where I need you to be, this is going to hurt.
Sorry, Dr. Frank.
Go ahead.
I do think one other thing that could help our sister is when you develop those good habits that she's talking about, and you want to sustain them.
Yes.
God provided us with a very good formula of sustaining those good habits. What He said is that you have to go and pass it on. Okay? So if you have got a good habit of praying every night or in the morning,
share it with somebody.
Instead of always doing it yourself, find another partner who needs to be lifted up to that good habit that you. And when you do for a certain period of that one, you move to the next one. You move to give yourself a job. Actually, that's what.
Become a disciple, right? He says, all things that I have taught you, teach them to observe. Right? Teaching them to observe all the things that I have taught you. That's the Great Commission, Matthew 28. And it was the secret sauce I mentioned last night, for those of you who are here, the social connectivity is when you start joining yourself to other people. The Bible says to not forsake the gathering of yourselves together, and all the more as you see the day approaching. So gathering together with people who are struggling just like you, wanting to do the same just like you, that can turbocharge your efforts to reform better habits to replace the ones that you want to get rid of. So thank you for sharing that, Joe. All right. It looks like you guys are ready to go to sleep, so I'm going to give you a chance to do so by closing. Maybe you want me to have a close word of prayer? Or Helena, would you like to close with prayer and finish up?
Dr. Frank, thanks a million. You will be the one who will be closing with a prayer. But before, we will do just organizational stuff for tomorrow. So thank you, everybody, for coming. We have quite a big audience today afternoon, so which is really great to see it. So how it will work tomorrow, so we will start at 12 o'clock. We will have a keys, right? We will have the keys. So 12 o'clock tomorrow, Dr. Franklin will have one presentation. Then we will have a lunch. So who is coming, please, if you can, bring and share. Taffy and Norma will have again something as well. So just bring and share it the same way as we did today. We will have a lunch together, and then at 4 o'clock, we will have a big time for the questions and answers. So if you still have something what you want to ask, there will be a place for that tomorrow. So we will be roughly finishing around 5, depends how many questions you will have, could be half 5. So, but no pressure with the time. So that's for tomorrow. So thank you very much for coming, and Dr. Franklin will pray for us, and then you can be ready to go home.
Let's bow our heads together. Loving Heavenly Father, we're grateful for the invitation to come to you and bring all of our burdens, our failures, our weaknesses to you, to join them with your strength and with your knowledge and your abilities, which we lack. Lord, forgive us for our sins. Help us to be better examples to those around us. May we inspire them with our testimonies that we were once like anyone else, and that through the power of the indwelling Christ, we are on a journey to become something better and greater than we used to be. Though we may not be what we ought to be just yet, we know that in Christ we can indeed grow into the fullness of Christ. And we're thankful for that invitation. We're thankful for your Holy Spirit. And we now just pray that you would give us safe travels back to each of our homes, and that we can safely and enjoyably join each other's company again tomorrow. Amen.